Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. I haven't really been able to go anywhere or talk to anybody without hearing about how tough things have been lately. And it's been tough here too. I know exactly the vibes. So when I was thinking about what to talk about on the podcast this week, I figured the best thing I could do is address the question on everyone's minds. When do things start getting better? Today on the podcast, the next episode in my ongoing Pluto and Aquarius series, and this one's about us. Then stick around for some upcoming events and what to expect next from Petty Astrology. Let's start with a little refresher on Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto moved into the sign of Aquarius back in November of 2024, and it had been going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius for some time before that. And then in November 2024, it moved into Aquarius where it'll be for the next 19 years. So we're talking about a good chunk of time here when we're talking about the Pluto and Aquarius era. Pluto is a planet that gets a bad rap, but that's because it has to do with some pretty deep and serious things, and it brings deep and serious things to light. And it has to do with transformation, which is something that often feels very powerful and somewhat out of our control. And Aquarius is the sign that represents humanity. It represents all people on this planet because that's where humanity is located. The relationship between humanity and Earth is almost one and the same because no matter which way you swing it, Earth is our home. So the two are pretty interlinked. And given where we are at this moment in history, we are living through some of the biggest changes that humanity has seen, perhaps ever. And that's not just down to Pluto and Aquarius. That has to do with a lot of other astrology that's happening during this period. But even if you don't know anything about astrology, I think looking around and experiencing this moment, it should feel pretty obvious that there's some big stuff on the horizon and some existential problems that humanity is going to have to address if we want to keep existing in somewhat of the way that we do now. Not only are we facing rising fascism across the globe, we're also facing climate crisis because the planet has been pushed to the point where we have disrupted cycles and systems in ways that we don't necessarily know exactly the extent of the damage that is being done. Scientists have models and ideas for how they think these things will progress, but with the news lately, we're learning that some of the things that we're actually seeing play out in our reality are actually worse than some of these models have predicted. And I know right off the bat, these are heavy, serious, and depressing things to talk about. And understandably, these serious issues are things that a lot of people would rather look away from because they're almost overwhelming to begin to try to address. But the thing is, the change is here. These issues are our present reality. As scary as that may be, the sooner that we establish that truth and its common knowledge, the sooner that things can change for the better. Some people might look at it as if we're living in hell or some kind of purgatory. Some people choose to view this as a punishment. And you are welcome to do that if you want to. I can't control what you believe. But if your conclusion is that you're being punished and you're just going to lie down and take it, well, then we're in trouble. Because another option that we have that I think is much more promising is to understand that this is an opportunity. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably thought we needed change in this world for some time now. And now that things are really starting to change, you're probably like, no, not like that. Understand that what is happening right now is a lot of ugly shit that has been going on and building up for a long time being unearthed. These revelations are making changes in many people's day-to-day lives. And for a lot of regular working class people, not for the better. But the real potential for change that's presenting itself in this Pluto and Aquarius era is not just whatever people in power are sending down the pike. The real power in Pluto and Aquarius is with the people, regular people, not those who set themselves above regular people because they're too powerful or too important to be one of us. I'm talking about the power mongers, the war criminals, the billionaires. Those are the people standing between us and the future of humanity. They've made their intentions very clear at this point. It does feel like we're getting our noses rubbed in it because this is class war. This is people with power and resources versus the majority of humanity, which has less of those things. Humanity has seen a centuries-long concentration of power and resources, and we've finally reached a tipping point. Bosses are driving workers out of the workforce, hoping to replace them with AI. Corporations are price gouging us. Governments are abducting us and using our tax dollars to do those things, along with building more prisons, where so-called criminals are already working for pennies to make things for corporations that sell that shit back to us. We are swimming in blood and exploitation. And that's how the people in power would like it to be. Because then we're complicit. Then we're not as motivated to turn against these things that up until now have just been normal parts of a lot of our lives. They bank on us being too scared to do anything, too committed to the illusion of things staying the same, on us not understanding that there are way more of us than there are of them. They know that there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And for them, that's kind of part of the appeal. They get to be extra special and build their bunkers and fantasize about escaping to Mars with other rich people so that they can leave the rest of us here to die. If this sounds too extreme or absurd to be real, I invite you to look around at the things that these people are influencing or directly involved in, because it shows blatant disregard for the lives of regular people, which is not new. It has been something that has been a part of humanity for a very long time. One of the most successful strategies for those in power to maintain that power has been to pit regular people against one another. Because if we're too busy fighting people from other countries, or immigrants, or so-called criminals, or whatever boogeyman they trot out, we're not going to fight the systems and power holders, and then things stay the same. We can't afford to let that happen. With our backs against the wall, we will have no choice but to realize our collective power. When do things get better for us? The answer is, things get better when we make them better. Now, I know some listeners were probably hoping I was going to cite some planet or a transit that was going to come in and save the day. But that's not how this one's going to work. But before you give up and turn off the podcast, hear me out. If you're a regular listener, you know that I very often point out opportunities in the energy for collective action. And let me be clear, there is always opportunities for us to take action to make this situation better. You don't have to wait for any specific planet to do any specific thing to move yourself forward. But in this year and next year and the years to come, there are an enormous amount of obvious opportunities for people to stop sitting on the sidelines, to build relationships with people around you, to build and strengthen community connections, and to weaponize those communities for collective betterment. How do we make it better? First of all, we need to practice solidarity. Putting our heads down and just focusing on ourselves will not save us. We need to understand ourselves as part of a collective of people who want liberation for themselves and others. This is hard in cultures where we have been taught to identify with our families, or the country we live in, or immigrated to, or people who are like us. We need to have solidarity even with people who aren't like us and fight for one another, treating attacks on one of us as attacks on all. That means changing the way that you think about other people. This means showing up for people in your local community and beyond, whether that's with your time, energy, or money. As it stands now, existing systems of power and technology are being weaponized against regular people, against the working class. And so the only solution is for us to cooperate and support one another in lockstep. We have to refuse to be divided or divisive. We waste precious energy fighting each other instead of the problems. And that's how the people in power like it, because it keeps the attention off of them. The enemies of liberation see us all as different versions of the same problem. So it benefits us all to free ourselves and the planet from the death march of capitalism so we can live lives of dignity, joy, and cooperation. We also make it better by liberating our relationships. As you can imagine, practicing solidarity is going to change our relationships. It's become pretty normalized to treat people like shit if you're writing comments on the internet, or you're annoyed with customer service, or you're interacting with a homeless person. Not to mention things like domestic violence, which can happen with the people closest to us. There are so many reasons people will use to justify treating other people like shit. When you start looking at other people as potential allies, or as people who are suffering under the same systems that you are, it opens doors of possibility. That doesn't mean we need to tolerate bad behavior, but we need to explore and practice new and liberatory ways of interacting with people in general. We need to decolonize and prioritize community relationships. We need to practice respect for people simply because they're other people and not because they belong to us in some way. We need to learn more about our shared needs and interests. We need to improve our listening skills and communication so we can fight fascism and collaborate on mutual aid projects and direct action and build a better world together. I've predicted that Pluto in Aquarius will be a time period where the way humans communicate, work together, and relate to one another will evolve. And if we decide to take the opportunity, I believe it'll truly change the world and make things better. We also need to keep hope alive. Change often looks really ugly when it's in progress and you can't see the end result. But I have great news for you. The liberating relationships and working together stuff, there have been people working on that since before any of us were alive. We have inherited a lot of wisdom from our ancestors. And there are people who have been doing this work longer than we have, who are ready and excited for more of us to join them. They have already been feeding people, housing them, helping them get out of prison, teaching, providing support, sharing their resources and skills, disrupting weapons manufacturers, literally fighting back against people in power who are out for blood, and more. And that is where so much of our hope lies. We are the hope. Instead of expecting the mainstream news owned by a few billionaires to show you all the resistance that is happening, you're going to have to look for it, and hopefully by being directly involved. There is resistance work happening every single day, and there have been wins. Those are things I like to share in my newsletter and in the current events channel in my Patreon. You are welcome to share things there too. That's what that space is for. And make it a habit outside of this community too. If there are experiences or wins that you can share with other people, do it. Celebrate the wins in other communities. Join forces with them when it makes sense, even if it's just by sharing what they're doing or sharing resources or information. Another thing that is so important if we want to make things better is to find your corner of the work. Fascism and climate crisis are two of the biggest threats humanity is facing right now. And when you say it like that, it can sound too big to tackle. Let me try and make it easier. There is no one person who is going to come and fix this mess. There is no superhero or president or prime minister or revolutionary who is going to lead us to the promised land. Pluto in Aquarius is about popular mass movement, so always remember that it's not all up to you or to me. It's us. You do need to be engaging in resistance, which is something that I've been talking about for years in an attempt to desensitize more people to the concept of fighting for radical change, because I've known some of these waves were going to start crashing, and now we're here. I hope that if you're not already engaged in resistance, that this is your sign. Start with the issues you're passionate about and the skills you have already and the relationships you have already, and let those be a guide. We have our feelings and interests for a reason, and you don't need to impress anybody to be useful to this movement. The important thing is to show up for whatever it is you choose to do and learn as you go. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. And we've already established you don't have to be a savior. But you do have to show up for your corner of this collective work. The idea is that if lots of us take our corner of the work, we can cover a lot of ground and work together to actually facilitate the creation of better systems than we have now. Systems that actually benefit people and not just capitalist shareholders. If you don't know where to start, a little over a year ago, I wrote a compact little book called Finding Community Using Your Astrology. You don't have to know much about astrology, but I walk you through how to start figuring out what kinds of community work might be the best fit for you based on your personal astrology. I'll put the link to that in the show notes, and if you become a sponsor on Patreon, you get the book and the class I taught about it with the price of membership. It's a lot of good information and it's not too long. I intentionally made it as easy to digest as I could because I know that time is of the essence and I want people to be as empowered as they possibly can be as they go out into the world and take on new projects. Another way that we can make things better is by adapting. There's plenty of change coming our way during the Pluto and Aquarius era. And the people who will have the hardest time are those who refuse to adapt. The same old things that we've been doing may not work anymore. And if we refuse to change to meet the circumstances that arise, we may fall behind. If you are somebody who has been through some shit, you're probably pretty resilient and adaptable. And that's a strength, and it's probably given you skills that you might even be able to teach other people who maybe haven't had those experiences. We need to be light on our feet. We need to be willing to experiment and step outside of our comfort zones and try new things because we are in new territory. There's going to be a lot of creativity and discovery throughout our work in Pluto and Aquarius, but we only get that if we are willing to adapt. We can also make things better by educating ourselves and others. In order to realize our collective power, we need to learn more from the people who've fought for liberation before us and those who've been fighting now. We need to shift our culture to where building communities, strengthening our relationships, and engaging in mutual aid work are just regular parts of our lives. Not particularly remarkable, but just a part of being a human being. In some cultures, that is already true, but for a lot of us, this is not the case. So some of us have more to teach, and some of us have more to learn. The truth is, we all have a lot to learn though. Nobody has all the answers, and we need to understand that this whole period of time is a major learning process for humans. We're going to learn the most by doing. Aquarius is the sign of innovation and inspiration. And as we do this work together, we're going to see creativity and progress like we've never seen before. That's kind of part of the magic of this moment. And it's also part of the magic of being a human being. If you look back at history, you'll see that when we work together, especially when we're facing terrifying threats, somehow we manage to pull off incredible things against the odds. Our task for Pluto and Aquarius is to communicate and organize lots of people effectively to change the way we live for the better. We have the numbers, and together we have the power. All we have to do is act like it. I believe in us, and I hope you do too. Lots of cool stuff coming up for the petty astrology community. I'll be doing Pope Francis's astrology chart with Mackenzie Wollenzine just in time for that conclave to get going. And I'm also working on a special Neptune in Aries episode for Patreon sponsors, so you can look for those episodes soon. If you don't already know, I do the live version of this podcast on Twitch Thursday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific. I go deeper into what we talk about here on the podcast and get more specific with current events and how things are progressing during this incredible time of change. Pluto in Aquarius is throwing a lot of curveballs, so it's nice to have a place to connect and talk about how we're moving through this energy. If you've been wanting a reading with me, I'll be doing mini astrology readings live on the show on May 15th. Sponsors of the podcast will have a chance to book their spot in advance. And if you're not a sponsor, you can join us on the day of, first come, first served. This is the most affordable I get, and I don't do this very often, so I'm excited to get to read for more of you. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in on Patreon for even more petty astrology. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Kaycee Felton-Lui. The podcast art is by Max Swanson. The music is by Paul Schneider. This episode was brought to you by my sponsors over on Patreon.